And then, last but not least, we will also have, actually before that, we'll have Mr. Toshimoto Mitomo, who is Executive Deputy President and CSO at Sony Group Corporation. And Mr. Mitomo we look forward to hearing how the private sector can contribute to building the kind of dynamism and innovation we're looking for here. Last but not least, we will hear from Mr. Samaila Subairo, who is President and CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, and he will discuss the financial mechanisms that are required to support Africa's industrial ecosystem. I'm going to be asking the panelists a couple of questions more specifically. And the first speaker is going to be His Excellency John Mahama. And the question that I have for him, which also will be answered by two other panelists, is why investing, Your Excellency, why is investing in youth-driven industries, specifically in startups and in creative sectors, essential for Africa's economic diversification in the 21st century?
Yeah, thank you, Ahuna. Very happy to be a part of this panel to share a few of the insights in why we need to diversify African economies, especially with regards to youth startups. The answer is simple. It's that the demographics have changed and that the majority of the population in Africa is youthful. And so there's no way you can grow a successful economy without investing in the youth. The youth form 60%, if you take the age category of between 16 and 35, they form 60% of Africa's population. And so that's not a demographic you can ignore. But aside from that, the world is changing and it's now a knowledge economy. The youth are interested in certain sectors that are not the traditional sectors. And so in the creatives, in the renewable energy space, even if they go for traditional sectors like agriculture, they are looking at agri-tech and other, knowledge-driven aspects of those traditional sectors. And so it is important to find where their interests are and invest in those sectors so that you can attract the youth to go into those sectors. Now, if you look at Africa, in 2024, there was about an investment of 4.2 billion in startups, and a lot of that went into, the biggest majority was about 45%, which went into fintechs. The fintech space is growing at an astronomical rate in Africa, and is mainly driven by smart tech-savvy youth who have seen openings and are taking advantage of it. In all our countries, a change in the economic structure is happening. For instance, in Ghana, in 2015, the services sector overtook agriculture and industry and manufacturing to become the largest sector in our economy, and that's how it should be. And so, for instance, if you take the fintechs, I met the fintech groups, and one of the interesting ones I found was an agri-tech company, and it was solving a problem that we've been struggling with as government for many years, how to extend credit and support to farmers in order that they can increase productivity. And so we had a shot in the dark approach, distributing fertilizers, distributing inputs, and so on and so forth. And you couldn't tell who exactly those inputs were going to and whether you were getting value for money for those inputs. I mean, these young people set up a fintech, they set up a platform, they gave mobile phones to farmers, they distributed to the agricultural inputs to the farmers based on their acreage and their need, and based on the fact that they had them on the platform, they could send credit to them by mobile money, and at the end of the farming season, go directly to the farmer and offtake the production. And that changed it completely. The farmers are able to get a credit score now. And so you can see who's credit worthy and who's not. And so it's changed the face of agriculture. It's changing the face of agriculture in our country. Apart from that, the creative sector and youth startups are adding jobs faster than the traditional sectors. And so if you take the creatives, renewable energy and those spaces, they add about 4 jobs before you can create 1 job in agriculture or manufacturing. And so investing in that sector means that we can absorb more of the myriad of young people who are coming out of school. If we decide to concentrate on manufacturing and industry, Africa needs to turn up about 12 to 15 million jobs a year. You cannot create that in manufacturing and industry and agriculture alone, but the rate at which the creatives and digital space add jobs is much faster than the traditional economy. So it's a place that we must invest as governments in order that we can absorb more of the youth. We know that we say the youth bulge or the huge youth population in Africa is an advantage, but if we do not create enough jobs fast enough to absorb those young people coming out, then it will become a gunpowder keg and it could consume us.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You know, one of the things that you've highlighted here is the volume, the scale of the need when it comes to jobs. Thank you. Yes, I think His Excellency deserves a round of applause there. You have really highlighted the need on the job front and the fact that we're not just talking about small numbers, we're talking about big numbers. And if we're talking about big numbers, then governments alone, the public sector alone cannot absorb this. And this is where the private sector comes in. So I'm going to go to you, Mr. Mitomo. If I could address the same questions to you, how do you see that playing out within the private space?
Okay, thank you very much. And this is an honor to be on the panel. And as His Excellency clearly explained, the demography and the young generation booming, I think that is the most important factor for the private sector, especially the company like Sony, who is making a business based on entertainment. And I think that the content is based on culture, based on the story, based on history. And I think that the African region has all of them. And the younger generation is more like digital native, so that they are very familiar to, express their emotions, creating a content, distribute that from social network. So that I think that is the most suited way to scale the business. And especially the Sony is just an entertainment company, so that we need to work with somebody who has a better knowledge about the building infrastructure, healthcare, micropayment, and so on. So when we made a specialized incubation fund in Africa, we call it the Sony Innovation Fund Africa. We are working with International Finance Corp, World Bank, because they already made a significant investment in, the healthcare, micropayment, infrastructure, and energy. So we can support to the, younger entrepreneur or startups by using those infrastructure, what kind of business they can create on the top of it. And that's how we can contribute. And why we are doing this? Because the content is so diverse and now international. Anybody can access the content from anywhere. So that I think that the content generated in the African region is extremely valuable, interesting, special, distinguished. So that's give us a business as well.
Very interesting. You're talking about values now and assets that are actually in this space. And of course the talent of young people. But you did mention something that I've often heard entrepreneurs and startups in Africa complain about, which is infrastructure. Oftentimes they're not even just talking about the capital. We think it's all about capital and financial, but a lot of startups are struggling with the absence of infrastructure to build their enterprises on. And so it's very interesting that you refer to that as something that not only government, but also private sector can make available existing infrastructure that it's using for incubation and acceleration of these startups. Thanks very much for that. Can we please give him a hand over? And now, Jimmy, you have heard from a head of state, and you've heard from a head of a very serious company here in Japan. You are on the front lines in terms of what they are talking about, which is this new space of entrepreneurship, of non-traditional development frontiers. Are you receiving the kind of support that you expect? And I'm putting the same question to you. What will it take to really cause this diversification of economies to happen from your perspective?
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Your Excellency, your answer really for me, it really touches like the heart of how I feel about this question. It's very simple. At the end of the day, it's job creation. That's it. Can we create more jobs? And yes, we can. I'll give you an example. I'll give you two very clear examples. Just two random examples. There are a million of them that I could pick from. But let's take, for example, the DRC. In the DRC, there are over 200,000 artists. Last year, only 203 of them were paid music royalties. Okay? And it's a global problem as well. I'll give you another example. On Spotify, there are 12 million artists on Spotify, but only 71,000 of them made more than $10,000 last year. That's 0.6% of the 12 million artists on Spotify. So I think right there, it's very clear that, and this is the type of work that we're doing through Mood Swing, where we're creating ways for artists, producers, composers to monetize their work in innovative ways. And so what you said as well about the fact that it's got to be stuff that the youth loves to do, because they're only, I mean, you're going to have, by 2050, we'll have the highest youth population on the, in the world, and there are only so many minds that are going to absorb that. Do you know what I mean? So, and it's got to be, it's basically turning this talent, this passion into jobs. That's how I feel about it.
Young people in Africa, overworked and underpaid, and how we need to leverage both public and private space to make sure that there is return on the amount of talent and energy that they are putting into the work. I'm going to get to another question. And this one is for you, Dr. Tanaka, President of JICA. What enabling policies and institutional frameworks are needed to support innovative ecosystems that can compete globally while also remaining locally rooted?
Well, thank you very much. I think we should do many basic things to create innovative ecosystem. I think the right infrastructure and capacity development of the people, and then development in many sectors, not just manufacturing, but art sectors with the agricultural sector. I think I agree with Jimmy completely that job creation is very important. And then in the case of Africa, you need to explore where you could create jobs And so I think one sector, I think agriculture maybe is one area where, in addition to manufacturing and other sectors, JICA has been working on many of these areas and doing many traditional things like infrastructure and education. One project called Project Ninja. Ninja stands for Next Innovation with Japan. And, and this Project Ninja is intended to create ecosystem for those energetic startups. So far, we have cooperated with 757 startup companies in such countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Uganda. And initially we started with technical cooperations and networking, but we have decided that in order to motivate startups, I think financial support is very, very important. And with the encouragement of the Japanese government, the JICA law, which stipulates what we can do, was revised last April, so that we could do more flexible things. Well, just this month, we started non-sovereign blended finance operation to provide funds to the fund called the Persistent Africa Climate Venture Builder Fund, which is supporting climate tech startups in Africa. And so I think with this sort of financial support and also activities of networking, we would be able to encourage those startups which could really sustain their activities and which could increase their increase job opportunities for youth. But then, of course, there are necessities of creating appropriate legal and institutional schemes, and so that area too we need to work together with many governments of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. I think your emphasis on regulatory frameworks, because money is important, but money needs to flow in a way that it gets to the people who need it, and sometimes it takes institutional frameworks that recognize the right regulations. So assistance, development assistance also flowing in that direction is very important. I want to come to you, Mr. Subairo. You know, we're talking a lot about finances and the financial instruments are sort of the big elephant in the room sometimes because we know capitalization is difficult for African financial institutions, but also the perception of risk for those who have the finances. Africa suffers from this image of being high risk, and cost of capital is so high because of this. Now, putting the same question to you, from where you sit, which is really trying to make the money work in the business world, how do you see this? How do you see the needs in the institutional areas to unlock the kind of finances that these startups need?
Good evening or good afternoon, and thanks for that question. I'd like to start by thanking TICAD for convening this event and for these distinguished panelists that we have. I would say that the subject of today's conversation, the theme of moving from or diversifying through sustainable industrial ecosystems, couldn't be more apt. Why? Because in Africa, and particularly at the AFC, we have strong conviction that Africa's economic future is in the transformation of Africa's resources. Transformation that creates jobs, transformation that empowers Africa's youth, transformation that ensures that our promise or potential of being the future workforce of the world is real. And we are focused on how we constantly demonstrate and transform that potential to progress and prosperity for our people. So we couldn't be discussing a more relevant topic for Africa, especially because we are in Japan, a society that has seen the benefits and have replicated transformation over and over again. So it's a good platform for a partnership. So for us at the AFC, we think that it's very important that we are focused on how African economies can move away from exporting raw materials to capturing and retaining more value on the continent, building the infrastructure that allows for that transformation to happen. That means investing in energy systems, means investing in transport and logistics, means investing in connectivity, which is why we're very focused on building regional infrastructure. We're focused on building rail links, road links that ensure that the continent is connected. We're also focused on how we can ensure that the vision of economic integration happens. So if you recall, at independence, there was the realization that our economic or political independence means nothing without economic independence, and that we are too fragmented if we don't create regional markets. And the most recent creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is proof of how vast our markets can be if we work together to ensure that we are building the infrastructure, especially that will connect our continent, and also ensuring that we build a productive base for goods to be traded to be made in Africa. Made in Africa means jobs for our people. So for us, we're very focused on how we can ensure that we build the infrastructure that enables industrialization, and we build the infrastructure that ensures there's connectivity, and that we are in the main using African capital as well for that. Why? We know that no industrialization or no growth is sustainable if you don't have local actors. So local actors means Africans taking ownership of our development, means using African resources for that development. And we know from experience that it is only when we start to invest our capital and demonstrate what is possible that we can have partners come work alongside us. And we have seen partners here in Japan support that. We have several partners here that we work with for scaling infrastructure and industrialization in Africa, and we think that this can be replicated. We also have seen that within Africa we have vast resources, that if we change the regulation, create the regulatory environment, we would be able to use that resource for our development. And it will also speak to the point you made, Ahunna, about our cost of capital and the risk premium that we have. So if we are constantly keeping our resources outside the continent, there is no better demonstration of how risky we are if all our resources are outside the continent. If we also cannot use our resources to develop locally, then that development cannot be sustainable. So if we are talking to each other, talking to our financial institutions, the $75 billion that we pay in prejudice premium annually because of our high cost of fund will disappear. So for us, it is important that we take ownership of our development, build the infrastructure that enables us to connect and industrialize, build the industries that would attract jobs for our people, support technology, support creative industries, support innovation by providing digital infrastructure, providing, I would say, innovation hubs, providing, all the tools that will be required for job creation, because we can't possibly create all those jobs, in the traditional sectors. So a focus on youth, a focus on innovation will ensure that we create jobs. And just for us to land on this point, so if we take an example of something that's very basic that we need, for homes, for offices, for daily use, like aluminium. Aluminium, if you take, let's say, 100 tons of aluminium and just export to raw bauxite, maybe maybe $8 million from exporting 100,000 tons of bauxite. But 100,000 tons of aluminum is $260 million. So if you are taxing $8 million and taxing $260 million, you can see the difference. You can see how that tax from value-added products can be used to invest in health, in education, and in security. So our need for development assistance diminishes because we have the tax base that can support our economic growth and diversification.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Smaila. I think you've made some very key points there, and that sort of triggered me to come back to a question. This one, I really would like to ask it to those on the private sector side, and I'd like to hear a response from His Excellency, the President, and also Dr. Tanaka. All of you have somehow referenced the fact that we're talking about breaking new ground in terms of non-traditional ways of doing business. That means that you are actually saying that we need reform because the institutions and systems in place are not tuned in to this next generation, new generation of workers, of actors, of talent, and of need out there. So can you reflect a little bit? And here I'm asking you, Jimmy, and Mr. Mutombo, what policy reforms, just give me some key policy reforms you think will be necessary, essential, to be able to unleash the superpower that we see among young people. Starting with you, Jimmy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very good question. So a couple of years ago, I created a TV format called The Coolest OGs, which was sold internationally. It was a format about 10 people over the age of 60 who compete in a series of fun and exciting challenges with the help of their grandkids to see who is the coolest OG. And it was sold internationally, and when we sold it, they told us that there was a list. And they were basically pricing it based on where the IP came from, based on where the intellectual property came from, and Africa was at the bottom of that list. So I actually got the lowest price. And this is really what made me understand that our creativity is being undervalued just because of where we're from, which is insane. So I think things like co-creating and enabling policy frameworks on, for example, how our intellectual property can be protected, how our creative technology can really be treated not as a side project, but as a real force for economic growth is really important. Secondly, of course, investment and smart capital, not charity and just grants, but really the type of risk-taking capital that can help to help businesses scale. And I think lastly, really partnerships. So partnerships with all of you in this room today are three things that I think would really help with that.
Thank you, Jimmy, for that. I'll go to Mr. Mutombo, please.
Well, I can give you the two answers. One is about, as Jimmy said, how to share the upside, regardless of the size of the business. It's very important. And so that there is new technology, like a blockchain, NFT, and Web3 type of things, can share the revenue to the creators wherever they are, regardless of the size of the money. It doesn't matter, the $1 million or $10,000, and they're very transparent. I think those kind of things and allow us to use those kind of technology without the policy that certainly encourage us to communicate more. And I think that is one of the ways to solve your problem, which you just said before in your statement. Another one is more like where I come from, because Japan, as the population is getting smaller and smaller, there's more aging. And Africa is the opposite. So I think that we are complementary, but how to work together that sometimes, maybe because of the language issue, but to work together internationally, there are certain, limitation for us. For example, if you try to take examination license to work in Japan, it has to, the people has to take a test in Japanese or those kind of things. I mean, healthcare, I do understand, but the creation contents has to be, doesn't matter which language we speak.
Right. And I agree with you. I think what you're saying is super important, like especially with the population and the fact that we're complementary, right? But there's so many things where, for example, Africa's creatives, musicians, they're incredibly prolific, and they're so great. And you, for example, what you just mentioned now with the blockchain technology, I think they're complementary. So. And I guess the language barrier and all of that. But what I'm saying is, if we identify certain, things that we can focus on and work together on, well, we can say, for example, well, you're really good at doing that. We're really good at doing this. Let's figure out a way to work together on that. You might have some things that you can bring to the table because, they're already done pretty much. And some things that we're going to be able to bring to the table to make it go even faster, and to also exchange that knowledge at the same time. And if it can't be done on everything, there definitely, certain specific, industries or sectors or particular places where you can make that synergy work, I think.
Thank you for that. I'm coming to you, Your Excellency. Listening to all of this, where do you see public sector role in facilitating what the two gentlemen just described from a policy regulatory perspective?
I think that the public sector must see the private sector as partners and not an irritant. In the past times, it's like, this sector is just about profit and all that. And so the public sector had tended to crowd out the private sector. Now everybody uses the hackneyed phrase that the private sector is the engine of growth. But how does an engine operate if you don't give it the right fuel, healthy fuel, engine oil, hydraulic oil for it to be able to operate properly? And so that's the role of the public sector. We must create policy that creates the framework for an enabling environment for the private sector to grow. The private sector is not Father Christmas. It will go where it can get a good rate of return on investment. And so it's government's duty to create the space for the public sector to exercise its creativity. And that is what we need to reorient the public sector to do. I was Minister of Communications in the early days when the tech, ICT sector was exploding. And people were coming home and asking for licenses to set up internet cafes. And if you saw our regulator and the conditions you had to meet and all that, it was just crazy. By the time you go through that list, you would not be able to start anything. And so when I became minister, I said, but why license them? If you want to set up an internet cafe, why don't you just open it if you have the investment? And when we did, internet cafes exploded across the country. They didn't cause any harm. They didn't lead to any coup d'etat, nothing. When we're liberalizing our telecom space, they said, telecom is so important. You cannot give it to the private sector. It's sensitive. The CIA would listen into our conversations and all that. I mean, today, look at the telecom sector. It's contributing so much to the GDP of Africa's growth. So what we need to do is to create the right environment for the young people to thrive. We should not over-regulate. I met with the fintechs last year during the campaign, and I was asking them, what are your problems? And they said over-regulation. Why don't you ease it up so that we can invest more? And so I think that we must not be too sensitive in guarding and trying to regulate and all that. We must create the space so that these young people can exercise their creative talents and contribute to sustainable growth in our countries.
Your Excellency, please keep your mic for a second, because I'm going to fully exploit having you here with us for a few minutes now to ask you, maybe because I know you have to leave, one last question from your perspective. We're here in Japan. We are operating from a kind of a TICAD platform here, which has a core content around co-creation. And we just heard Jimmy talk about what Japan could offer to this space. When you think about really what we walk away from TICAD-9 on, when we think about unleashing the superpower of our young people on innovation and economic diversification, how would you craft this sort of collaboration? How would you frame the collaboration between Africa and Japan? What would be important in forging the kind of collaboration that yields co-creation, that then yields transformation, and eventually what you started with, which is creating jobs at scale?
Well, I don't think that we walk away from TICAD, we wave a magic wand and everything happens. While we expect that we move from just handouts and ODA to trade and investment with our Japanese counterparts, there is also an obligation on us as leaders of Africa to create the kind of space that makes it possible. One, we need governance reform. We need to reduce corruption. We must have accountable governance. Our people must feel that their resources are being put to good use. We must make sure that our economies are stable and predictable, so that if a Japanese investor wants to come and invest or partner with our young people in the service industry or in industry or fintech or whatever, he knows that he has a stable, predictable environment to be able to make that investment, and that he is able to repatriate his profit if he is able to make that profit. And so there's a lot that behoves on us as leadership to create the right platform in Africa for that investment to be able to take place. TICAD-9 pledged $30 billion for investment in Africa. I'd like to see what the audit of that would be, how much went into what. But I believe that the environment in Africa is better now at TICAD-9 than it was in TICAD-8, because now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have the beginning of a basis to bring the continent together, be able to set up in one country, but have a market of 1.4 billion people instead of a market of 33 million people in Ghana. And so we have a better platform today after TICAD-9 than we had after TICAD-8. And like my brother from the African Finance Corporation said, while the African Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer, we still need to put in the infrastructure to be able to trade amongst ourselves. If I want to export something from Ghana to Kenya, tariff-free, duty-free, even though we've signed the protocols, it's most likely that I'll put it on a boat. That boat will go to Europe before it comes back to Africa and to Kenya. And so my freight costs are going to be higher. And so the savings that I make in terms of being able to export duty-free, tariff-free are consumed by extra freight charges. And so there's still a lot that we need to do in Africa to be able to fully tap the potential. But I believe that Japan has the innovation, Japan has the technology, Africa has the natural resources, Africa has the young, innovative people. And if TICAD brings those two factors together, I believe that it would have been worth our while staying in Yokohama for 3 days.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. And if you would allow, we would like to excuse His Excellency at this moment because he has another commitment while we sort of wrap up with the rest of the panelists. Thank you once again. A big round of applause, please, for His Excellency. Thank you so much. If I may, as we start to conclude, if I may come back to this question that His Excellency just answered to the rest of the panelists, and I'm going to start from this end, from my immediate right to the end, one after the other. If you could please address this